Hello and welcome to the Palsy Podcast with me, Ciaran. I'm a playwright, screenwriter and podcaster from South Wales, and seeing as March is Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month, to mark it, I've decided to interview interesting people who have cerebral palsy from Wales and beyond every day in March. If you like this episode, please stay tuned for more throughout the month and like and share. Now enjoy this episode of the Palsy Podcast. Hello and welcome to episode 28 of the Palsy Podcast with me, Ciaran Fitzgerald. We are coming to the end of the month of March, and March is Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month. If you haven't been following my journey with the Palsy Podcast previously in the month, I'm interviewing interesting people who have CP every day in March to mark Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month. And if you're listening or watching this, please feel free, after you finish listening to this episode, to go back and listen to any of the previous episodes that I've recorded. But today, I'm delighted to be joined by Tom Wentworth. Hi Tom, how are you doing, mate?
Hello, Kieran. Hi, I'm good, thank you. How are you? Are you surviving this mad month?
Just about. I mean, a lot of people have come on this podcast and spoken about the use of energy when you have CPU saving energy. And I have not managed to save much energy this month, I must be honest with you. But I think I will miss it next week when it's all over. I don't think I could continue this indefinitely,
You'll
but
just
I
have
think
to
I
go back
will
and
miss it.
watch yourself. You'll just have to go back and watch everyone.
What's been lovely is looking at little clips and people sharing bits of insight, and hopefully we'll get some more of that from you today, Tom. So, firstly, I wanted to ask you, what was it like growing up with cerebral palsy? What was your experience in childhood, really?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? Because I was thinking about this, and I'm sure other people have said this too. But because you don't know any different, it's slightly odd to harder to say, really. I suppose. I suppose my experience is defined by the fact that I'm an only child, so I would, in a way, say that that is a bigger part of it because all my parents' attention was on me
Hmm.
and so I think I was sort of socialized quite early because they were so concerned. I didn't have siblings, so therefore, get me out into drama clubs and into choirs and after school activities and all that stuff. So I became aware of having CP by seeing it through other people's eyes, I suppose, if that makes sense. And and often being the only physically disabled person in those spaces.
Hmm.
I went to a special educational needs school from 3 until 7. Um, so,
Right.
so in that sense, I was one of many, and was certainly not the outsider in that sense. But then at 7, I went to into mainstream education. So then I was totally the outsider there.
What was that experience like within the special school? Did you, as someone whose CP doesn't affect your cognitive ability, did you feel frustrated? Did you feel that you weren't being... Do you remember much about that? Because obviously you were very young.
I do, yeah, and I did feel frustrated. Part of me loved it, because who doesn't like the opportunity to shine all the time?
Mm,
That's rather nice to feel that you're good at stuff. And I had great friends, and there is a lovely sense. I suppose I think we'll come on to talk about this, but I think what it set up for me is a sense of community and how important having a community around you is, and doing things like this is all part of making a
mm,
community
absolutely.
of CP friends and colleagues and so on. So that's continued and was really important. And I've still got a couple of friends from that time. But yeah, I was absolutely frustrated. And at 7, I was ready to go. And there was another friend who actually transitioned with me and then ended
Mm.
up going back to that school. So I carried on sort of on my journey into mainstream school and loved it and was very lucky because I went to a very small primary school where they were very understanding and aware.
Mm.
And yeah, it was great to be pushed cognitively, but it
Yeah.
came with its own challenges, because I then
Did
was the kind of the outsider or the different person,
mm.
and so that was quite a gear shift, really.
Did you have a good level of support in school when you moved into
Yeah,
mainstream?
I did. I did. They actually, to be frank, they put me into a year lower than the year I'd been in the previous school. So it gave me a bit of time to do the not worry about the educational
Mm.
stuff and just have a year to kind of catch my breath around everything else. So there was a bit of time to make the transition really work. So I think that was quite clever. And then I had various PAs and so on
Yeah.
looking after me, and those relationships have been quite precious to me. And so it's been, yeah, it was good. It was really good. And then of course you get into making friends and being one of the gang. And then it was, yeah, and then I was sort of off then. And school's so busy, isn't it? It sounds ridiculous.
Yes.
But school is often very busy. So you don't have time to, or I didn't have time to reflect on how different I was.
No.
I was just
Okay.
worried about getting my homework done or not getting my homework done or whatever.
And a lot of people have spoken on this podcast of having a really positive experience in primary school, and then they've transitioned to secondary being difficult or more challenging. But, everyone's different. So what was your experience of that?
Yeah,
Was
I didn't find that transition hard simply because I think I'd already done the transition.
Yeah,
If
that
you
makes
know what
sense.
I mean.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd already all those things were
Mm.
ironed out. I knew what I needed. The provision was there. Again, very lucky. Thank you to parents and teachers who did that. So I think I'd sort of done, and I was quite grown up, I think, by the time I was going to, and also I was a year older than all my
Mm.
peers. So, when I was leaving, so I was quite grown up and quite ready to go, I think, by that point, and sort of knew what I wanted to do. I was already writing at that point, so
So
I
how
sort of
did
I
how did
passed.
you how did you start writing? Where did that feeling of enjoying
I don't
writing
remember.
come from?
Yeah, I don't remember not writing, to be honest. I always did stories and not necessarily plays or television, but stories and I suppose what we'd call now fan fiction. We didn't call it fan fiction then, but I used to write stories with all my favorite sort of characters from the TV and things like that. And yeah, and I'd make little radio plays. I'd always be recording. I had one of those recorders where you had the two tapes, the two cassettes, and
Mm.
you could record stuff off the radio, record and play and press down, and then I'd make little programs. So it's always, I think I don't know, I still think that basically what I'm doing is a form of imaginative play because I was
Yeah.
an only child, and I think I've never lost I think play has always been so important, and I just didn't grow out of playing and making up characters and I'm still doing it now, and I kind of wanted to act as a child. That was a big
Mm.
thing, and I think that was all part of an extension. But I was always writing, probably quite precocious and maybe a little bit annoying, I suspect. But yeah, it was always I just don't remember not doing it.
And you kind of always thought this is what I want to career in. I want to be a writer. When did
I
that?
think yes. I mean, I watched a lot of television, and I was lucky because my mum was very into the theatre and had been a dancer and was very
Mm.
aware about the arts. So I think I just picked up that on the credits there were these people called writers, and that they wrote the stuff I was enjoying, and I started to watch more of their stuff, and I would see that when we went to the theatre, it was written by a playwright, and I'd see more of
Mm.
their stuff. Um, the Akeborns and the Bennets and all those kind of people, and you think, well, these people are having a career. They don't just write one thing; they write lots of things.
Yes.
And so I think it just got into me, and I thought, I don't know how you don't quite know how you do that, but I see names on books and things, so I'll give that a go. And I think maybe my parents had never said no to me, so I assumed that I just thought it was something you just got on and did, you know.
But you make a joke of that, but it's so important, isn't it, to have parents or support next to it who, hey, okay, that's what you want to do, so we will support you in
Massively.
whatever way you can do that. It's vital.
Massively. Yeah, and my mum did know about the theatre, and she had been in the
Mm.
theatre, so she knew it was kind of possible. She didn't know any writers. We didn't have those kind of connections, but she did know that it was a very things. I think that was also great. And also all that support I'd had at school. I had massive support from them about the transition and everything. And so I knew that I was kind of academically solid, I suppose, if
Yes,
that makes any sense. And and once you're in the school system, writing is prized, whether that's essays or whatever. So I was
yes.
doing a lot of it. So yeah, it was just very natural thing to do, and I've just never stopped doing it. So somebody will find me out eventually, Ciaran. Let's be honest. But
Well, if they
put
find
that
you
in the
out,
test.
if they find you out, Tom, I think I'll be close for you.
Oh, they're coming for you next. Yes,
Well, and do you have a process? Do you have a writing process, or does it vary depending on the project that you're working on?
well, it varies, and I know lots of people have said this on this podcast, so I feel like I'm sort of repeating what other people have said, but I think it's really important. It varies in terms of energy. It does vary in terms of project, but I'm having to learn, and it's taken me a long time, that I don't have a huge amount of energy, even on my best days. So it's taking
Mm.
account of that and making sure that I end the day with something, not it might not be 2,000 words or 20 pages or whatever it is, but it might, if it's one good page or a few words that are really good, then
Mm.
I'm happy with that. I used to set myself incredible deadline, targets for the day, and then be terribly disappointed. And I'm trying desperately to bring those right down and to just focus on a few quality words a day. And I'm starting to unbelievably in my 30s get the hang of holidays, which have never been a big thing for me, and I'm starting to quite enjoy them. So that's a new thing for me, a new experience.
I I think it can be very difficult, especially when you freelance, to give yourself license to
Mhm,
have time off. And I
mhm.
don't know if you're the same, Tom, but I put a lot of pressure on myself to think this has to be good. This has to be, I really have to put my focus
Absolutely,
and energy into this. And it can
absolutely.
almost take over everything else in my life when I'm working on something quite intensely. Eh,
Yes, well, I think you might not have chosen to do a podcast every day in the month if that wasn't your character trait, for example. But I totally get it, and I feel very much the same. And so to go back to your question about process,
Mm.
and my process is quite to the outside possibly quite chaotic, but I try and do what I call checking in. So I try and check in with the work every day. And that doesn't necessarily mean writing thousands of words, but it means just holding it in my head, so that the characters have room to do whatever it is they need to do. Or it might be that I just read over what I did yesterday and think about that. I
Mm.
might not add anything to it, but it just means that I'm sort of with the work all the time, and it's not taking over necessarily the entire day. So today I've got a really busy day of meetings and chats and so on, so there
Mm.
won't be any time write any
Yeah.
words, there won't be any energy left. So what I'll do is just read over what I did the last
Mm.
couple of days, and at least then it's when I'm going to a meeting or sitting, I can sort of have my brain half on it, and my subconscious can maybe solve a couple of problems. That's the
Yes.
main hope anyway, that I'll wake up tomorrow and think, aha, I have the magic solution. So I think it's about checking in with it, and also, just give myself time, and remembering that
Yeah.
I'm not an athlete. I'm really not, in so many ways, but even in writing, so it's yeah. And I like to have stuff I can tick. I'm very
Mm.
carrot and stick orientated, so I need something nice at the end of the day. I need a treat of some kind, and I need a kind of something I can tick off. So with notes, for example, if people give feedback, I
Yeah.
want to put that into a chart and tick it off. So basically, Kieran, I'm still looking
Okay.
for a gold star. You know what I mean? That's what I really want at the end of the day, is kind of
Yes.
a gold star and some house points. Basically, we never really grow up from being.
I, I, I don't think we do it. I think you're right. I think when certainly I've asked for notes from people, yes, you're asking for them to make the play better, but you want them to think that it's good. You know,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Or at
it's
least
that,
to say, Kieran, you've worked really hard on this.
yeah.
You can see that you've worked really hard, and then you can certainly I can sort of take any kind of criticism then, because I
Mm.
we're starting from a basis of yeah, you've done the very best that you can, and now we're going to make it better together. And I love
Mm.
that about writing, particularly
Yes.
writing drama, is it's such a collaborative process, and basically I'm searching for I'm an only child who's an extrovert, so I need community around me. But I'm totally
Mm.
unsuited to sitting at a desk all day on my own. It's a stupid job to have taken for an extrovert. So I basically need to know that at about 5 o'clock I'm going to get to see my friends and hang out. So that's probably a big part of my process. And the other is that I have several friends. I'm in a writers group, and we're all really
Mm.
close, and we check in with each other most days about how it's going. And that for me is really important,
That's
to
important.
say out loud, this is what I'm going to achieve today. And sometimes they say, hold on a minute, doesn't that sound like rather a lot? Check in with
Yeah.
your energy. And that's actually been really important, to see it through their eyes, of saying, no, I
Mm.
don't need to do 2,000 words a day. 200 will be really good. So yeah, it's quite a chaotic process, and I'm still a big fan of the all-nighter when it's needed, and
Oh, Tom.
that's not a good thing. But I'm not going to lie and say I'm not a big fan, because I am. I've never really got out of it.
Oh, rather you than me, Tom. Oh, the all. Speaking of all-nighters, we're going to talk about university next. So,
Yeah, yeah, yes.
um, so what was your experience in university like? Did you go to University of South Wales?
Yes, University of Glamorgan as it was then,
Right.
but University of South Wales as it is now. And yeah, I had a wonderful time at university. I loved it. Again, I took a year out in the middle after school, and that was great. And during that time, I actually ended up getting a column for a magazine called Able magazine, which is still going,
Okay.
I think, but it was a disability trade magazine, and they wanted, well, they didn't ask, but I wrote a piece about applying for university as a disabled student, and how tricky that had been, because it was
Mm.
it was quite a tricky process. And lots of places at the time that I applied to said, we're just not, we'd love to have you, but you've got the grades and everything,
Oh.
but our provision is not there. This was 2009, 2008, 2009.
Was that because of the accommodation or the building, the academic buildings and
Both,
stuff?
both. It was
Both.
quite, yeah, it was quite challenging actually, and quite a shock, if I'm honest, for me, because again, I'd sort of sailed through, if you know what I mean,
Mm.
through academically, and all my provision had been there, and then suddenly there was this stopping point of you're not going to be able to do that. You are very different, and I think actually for me that was a big moment. You were talking earlier about when did you kind of realize and
Mm.
feel different. I think it was almost then was the first time I felt really different, and that I was being stopped, and all my friends were sailing on. It felt to me to university places, and I wasn't. And so that was quite challenging for me that year. And I was very lucky that I could live at home, and my mum wanted me to be there, and that was great. But obviously, I felt, well, why am I not going off and doing my
Yes.
doing my thing? So I ended up going a year later and got the course at in Cardiff, which was wonderful. And that was a course, a radio BA. That was to do radio, which is something I've always loved and been fascinated by, and definitely comes from being a being a disabled person because of spending so much time in bed as a teenager, being
Mm.
operated on. Audio for me has always been a really safe space. So I know that if podcasts had been around then as they are now, I would have
Mm.
been a podcast junkie. But I'm totally addicted to audio drama and audio books and everything like that. So
Mm.
I'm a total oral learner, total oral thinker. So and that definitely comes from being isolated and immobile. That's definitely I
Mm.
can track that right back actually. So that was wonderful to go there and do 3 years of radio production, and we had to do it was great because we had to do everything. We had to present, produce, and you had to do. I mean, I had to do programs about sport, Ciaran. I mean, actually about sport. Um, and they had you doing our first day. We had to go out into Cardiff and stand on Queen Street and ask people on mic about what toothpaste they used. I mean, it was just extraordinary.
Goodness.
And do kind of vox pops and stuff. So it was fab, and I did feel there were only 12 of us, and I did really feel again. I felt kind of one of the gang, and I felt like I've got this, and yeah, nobody made me feel different. And actually, thinking back about it, I don't remember ever making a piece, and I think this is really interesting, ever
Mm.
making a piece at university about disability. Um,
Was that because it wasn't something you were interested in, wasn't something that you wanted to do at the start? I,
do you know what? I think it just never occurred to me, and
mm.
because I mean, I've done a lot of it since, and we'll come
Yes.
on to that. But I think it just never crossed my mind, and nobody said nobody said on the course, maybe that's something that makes you different. Now, I caveat all this with that my memory is terrible, so it might be that I made two or three pieces about disability, but they don't stand out to me. I made stuff about music. I made stuff about cake. I did quite a lot about cake, and baking because the Great British Bake Off had just kind of started in that
Mm.
year. So I made quite a lot about that, and did lots of sort of group projects, and I made a documentary about dating scams, and did all sorts of things.
Oh,
So that
interesting.
was it was great actually because. Um, Little did I know this wouldn't be the case when I moved into the industry, but I was able to do different things that were away from my identity. And that's actually been
Yeah.
very important and has not then massively been the case moving into professional life. So it was actually quite a treat. And I will say, I suppose the caveat to that is that while I was doing the course, I was still writing the column for Able magazine. So that was
Right.
about being a
Balance
disabled
that.
student
Yeah.
and what that was like. And I wrote a lot about kind of nights out and how and tricky things around access and stuff. So I did have an absolute awareness of that. But I think that yes, that was just like I sort of used that as my therapy. I think that column looking back. But I
Mm.
kept it for 4 or 5 years. I left
Oh, wow.
university by the time I finished doing it. So yeah, so always writing, Ciaran. But yeah, I find it really interesting that I didn't make massive amounts of what we now call disability content.
So,
Um,
so what was that transition then? You finished university and then you alluded to things that maybe became more challenging in terms of breaking into the industry, perhaps.
yeah, well,
So I'm correct in that.
Well, here's where disability is a marvelous thing, for me anyway, and it always has been kind of a little, when people say, I don't know if they've said this to you, Karen, but oh, if you had a magic wand, would you become
Mm.
non-disabled? And my answer is always no.
I
I'm
agree with you,
just
yeah.
stupid. Because it can be a real, well, the world could be a challenge. That's the social model of
Mm.
disability. But the disability itself has never kind of let me down, I feel. The CP has always kind of been there as a bit of a talisman, if that doesn't sound too woo.
Yes.
Um, and so I think, yeah, so knew I was coming up to the end of university, and what am I going to do next? And at that time, um, the luckily Cardiff was booming and still is. Wales is still booming,
Mm.
thankfully, with
Yes.
television production, and the BBC have a marvelous scheme called Extend, which is for disabled candidates to join the BBC, and so I applied to Extend and got a job on Casualty as a script assistant script editor,
Ah.
um, and so that was wonderful. So I actually finished university on the Friday and basically joined the BBC pretty much on the Monday, which was
Oh, wow.
so I was so lucky, but again, I would never have got that, or it would have been a lot tougher, if I hadn't that scheme hadn't existed and I hadn't had the CP. I sort of put the CP down to that, and some skill to find it out and things like that. But it was fantastic.
And there's a question here, isn't there? And I'm certainly not saying this personally about you, Tom, but there's a feeling that I've had sometimes. Oh, did I get that job because I'm a good writer? Or did I get that job because I'm disabled? And I think a lot of that maybe is internalized ableism and fear of tokenism. But have you ever felt like that? And how did you kind of deal with that, if you did?
I think I feel it when I have a fear that the work isn't good enough that I've handed in. And
Mm.
if I know that the work is good enough and I've worked as hard as I can on it, we're back to perfectionism again, then that fear doesn't crop up. So I've come to associate that, and I totally recognize it. And again, this is only my opinion on it.
Mm.
You may feel very differently, but I've come to associate it as actually a sense of fear from me that
Mm.
I didn't do quite the best that I could, or I ran out of energy at the last minute, or I had to pull an all-nighter because I'd been partying too hard or doing other things.
Yeah.
So I've actually, yeah, I can sort of separate those two out, and I think um, diversity and inclusion is a marvelous thing, and we need to be setting targets and bringing people along and basically reaching out. Those of us who've got a platform and are lucky enough to
Yes.
have that, we need to be reaching our hands down and pulling other people up afterwards. And so I'm not sure that it's always, I think talent will always rise to the top, right? And whether you've
Yeah.
got CP or whatever it is, and we've all got some difference. Like nobody is immune. I really believe that. And
Mm.
everyone is pre-disabled. I'm sorry to tell them, but that is the case.
Yes.
And so yeah, come along, and I think it's really important to to say, no, I got this because I deserve it. And sometimes
Yeah.
I don't feel that. And sometimes I've been asked to do jobs where I know it's a box tick. I absolutely know it's a box tick. And funnily enough, those jobs never turn out to be the
Ah,
happiest jobs. So
interesting.
I've started to sort of, I don't know, get a sixth. You get a sixth sense about them, and
Mm.
um, and yeah, so I hope that people offer me things and hopefully offer you things, um, that because we're good at what we do, or we've a perspective. I mean, that's the other part of it, isn't it? That when somebody offers
Yes,
something because you've a specific perspective to offer, then I think that's a different thing as well. I think that's
I
very
think that's a really good point. And that perspective doesn't always have to be direct lived experience, but can be an element of lived experience projected on something with which we've got maybe a little bit of familiarity, but the work that we create shouldn't always be about disability and shouldn't always have to be autobiographical.
well, no, that's been hard. That's been actually very the hardest thing for me in a way has been that I'm it's getting a little bit better, but I'm very rarely offered stuff that doesn't have a disability angle or an
Mm,
LGBT angle because I identify as LGBT.
mm,
And that's tricky. And I sort of say to people, but I want to write everything. I want to write from
yes.
every, I want to write all the fun stuff that isn't about those things. And I really also want to write about those things, but not all the time.
Mm.
Give me all the sweeties in the sweetie shop.
Speaking of projects, I do want to talk about Broken Hill later, but first I'd like to talk about because I was reading your bio on your agent's website, and one play in particular, Little Bits of Ruined Beauty, stood out to me. And can you talk a little bit about what the play is about and how you came to write the play?
Yeah, I can. Yes, it was a commission from Unlimited, and Pentabus, and it was performed by Pentabus, produced by Pentabus, for a rural tour. And it was about originally it was about three generations of women. One, a daughter who is disabled, and then a grandmother who's fast becoming disabled, and a mother who is also becoming disabled. Again, I'm very interested in kind of pre-disability,
Yeah,
and it was about those generations and how you go from being cared for as a child to being carer, and a sort of perennial theme for me really.
yeah,
And then it actually changed dramatically and became a two-hander about father and son, in that same predicament. So it became about the son going back to care for his father who had cared for him. And yeah, it was a really interesting experience, because I'm I would write it very differently now. My in-laws are currently needing care, and so we're in that situation. My mum at the time had had a big
right.
back operation. That's where the idea sort of came from. And so my husband and I were going home to care for her, and I just started to think about the the changes that happen in life and how much
Yeah.
she'd given me, and cared for me throughout my whole life and is still caring for me, and how different it is for parents of disabled kids,
Mm,
who have to continue that care for such a lot longer often.
yes.
And very intimate care. This, I should say, this is kind of about intimate care. And that then I was starting to do some of that care for her, but also realizing that I can't lift her, or
Mm,
or any of those things, and how upsetting that is for me, and how much guilt I felt at the time, and still feel to some extent, that I wasn't going to be able to do those things. So it's a complicated play, and hopefully it's got some humor in it as well. But it was, yeah, it was a really interesting piece to write, and very confronting in a way. And funnily enough, I've just written, and it was broadcast in July. I wrote a play for Radio 4 called When I Fall, which is a romantic comedy in seven falls. So it's the seven falls of the main protagonist, and it's about falling in love, but it also sort of tackles in a small way the caring that happens in relationships with a partner, in this case a same-sex
Mm.
relationship. But yeah, so it's a perennial theme for me that I keep returning to, this cared for carer balancing act.
And I don't know if you feel this, but in terms of when I have to ask my parents for help or assistance, sometimes there's that guilt of like, oh, should I be doing this myself? Should I be more independent? Should I? Do you know what I'm trying to say here? This,
Oh, totally, I do. And yeah, it's a very complicated thing that I'm not sure um, people really realize if they're not within the community.
mm,
And I think and also there's another element to it, which is they want to do it. The parents are sort of
mm,
without meaning to. My mum certainly has sort of never forgiven me, I think, for moving out because I think she'd still love to be doing it, and she loves um looking at, I mean, all parents do, don't they? Love looking after
mm,
children when they go home. But there's she sort of misses the routine of it, I suppose, in a way. And
yeah.
I don't want to speak for her, but it's complicated and it's emotional, and I have a funny feeling that I'll probably return to it in writing
Mm.
in some other form in the future. I tend to do this, Ciaran, where you think you're writing about one thing and you think you're writing about far away from yourself and it's nothing to do with you, and then some old theme like that pops up into the piece and you
Oh
think
yes,
writing the same
yeah,
thing again.
yeah,
You know.
yes, absolutely, yes. Um. Yeah, you can pretend to say, "Oh, this is about other people. This is not what I'm going through," but because of our lived experience, because of it's just some things crop up almost in every play, almost
Yeah.
without realizing automatically. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it was quite interesting to revisit that theme actually, sort of 8 years on, uh,
mm,
for the radio, because I had such sort of different feelings about it. So
how
it was
interesting.
it was intriguing and it was a different relationship. It wasn't between although there is actually a mother in the radio play as well being cared for, but it was quite interesting to see how I don't know, I'd matured in my not only in
Mm,
my writing, one hopes that that happens, but also in my thinking around care, I suppose. So that was
mm,
actually quite intriguing. So I sort of feel that little bits of Ruin Beauty and When I Fall are almost companion pieces. Having a conversation. I sort of like to, if that doesn't sound too mad,
no.
that they're sort of in conversation with one another and sort of two halves of me, really. So yeah, it's fascinating how but I tell you what is really interesting is that um certainly, well, for little bits as well, but certainly for the radio, because of social media, so many people wrote to me who I didn't know and said,
Oh, wow.
this is my experience about care and about I suppose the play is also about how do you navigate um, a sexual partner becoming a carer, and how do you have
Yes.
that conversation? And so many people wrote to me and said, this is our experience or my experience, and this is the unconventional relationship that I'm in. So I was really touched by that because I
I,
felt that it was giving something a bit of air that is maybe a slightly hidden truth.
mm. And this isn't in the questions that I've written, but something that came to me when you were speaking about that when you were kind of before you met your husband and like wanting to form a relationship. Did you feel any sort of that would be, was that difficult for you? Were there challenges? And what did you find in terms of navigating relationships
Oh
as
yes,
a disabled
there
person?
were definite challenges. I mean, I used to love going on dates because I'm nosy, and I would go on dates with people I knew I wasn't going to have any relationship with, but they just had a fascinating story. I think it's one of the best things about internet dating, actually. Um, and I think, yeah, that I got some great stories from that. Total magpie for stories, and and so that was fab. But yeah, I faced a lot of ableism in the dating world. It really is very it can be very difficult, very demoralizing, and very harsh. And people don't hold back. And I think it's much worse now with social media and Instagram and all of that kind of thing. So I don't envy any disabled people. And in fact, I don't envy anyone doing that, because it's really yeah, it's kind of dog eat dog. And I was very lucky that I met the right person, and they were immediately understanding, and that's been a wonderful thing. But I think it's yeah, it was hugely terrifying, actually. And I had lots of quite, looking back, and you don't think about this when you're in your early 20s, but quite terrifying experiences, and definitely experienced more ableism and bullying in the dating scene than I'd ever experienced in school or university.
And would you put on your online dating profiles that you're disabled, or would you not
Yes,
put it
I
there?
I always did, because I thought, well, it's part of me,
Mm,
and I felt that that was, I didn't want, there's enough shame within the LGBT community.
mm,
I thought, if I can be proud of my sexuality, then I've got to be proud of my disability. So yeah, I always did. Now, having said that, I don't judge anyone who makes the opposite
mm,
decision, and I understand why you would do that. But I think it would be incredibly odd to turn up somewhere, and I mean, my disability is very visible. I'm not, by the way, speaking about people with invisible disabilities,
mm,
um, but mine is incredibly visible. So they would see from the minute they met me, and you don't want to start that. I didn't want to
mm.
start that date on a lie, really. And also, I'm not ashamed of it, as I say. So
Yeah.
I was quite out and proud in all senses, I think. And that's my choice. And again, I wouldn't judge anyone who chose to do it differently. But
Do
again,
you,
there's a scene in the radio play that's quite similar to a dating experience I had, although names and places have been changed.
and I'm asking this question as a straight man, straight woman, so forgive me
You're
if I get
forgiven.
it
You're forgiven.
wrong.
It's a shame, but you're forgiven, Ciaran.
Are there any particular challenges of being gay and disabled in that intersectionality for you? Have there been anything that's cropped up that has been?
I I think I'll broaden that out slightly. Again, I would have to
Yes.
give a similar answer to to the answer about school and growing up disabled, because I don't know any I don't know any
Well,
differently.
yeah, of
Um,
course.
so there's slightly that. What I will say is that it's, as a writer, it's quite difficult to get that intersectionality um, on screen or stage or radio or anywhere else. Actually, they either want you to be the disabled writer or the gay writer. They don't really want you to be both, and that's been quite interesting for me. So I don't know if that's significant, but often I feel like
Mm,
I'm being asked to wear different hats when actually they're pretty much the same hat, because they're just me.
yeah.
So that's been more surprising than I would have thought. And I think I sometimes have to, if I do get sort of um, stopped in the street, and people, I don't know if this happens to you, Ciaran, but people are very keen to either pray for you or lay their hands on you or things like
Goodness
that.
me, yeah.
Very evasive with very invasive, I mean, with their bodies, which is incredibly strange. They I have to sort of stop and think, is this ableism or homophobia? Which
Oh,
one
goodness.
am I which one am I responding to? What do they see? So I think it's yeah, I don't think it's been more challenging,
Mm.
um, but I think it's been interesting in a work context, in a writing context.
Yeah.
I've very rarely been able to put both parts of myself into the same piece of
That's
work.
fascinating. That's fascinating. Thank you for that insight, Tom.
No,
That's
well, it's important. It's important to say it, and I think because I'm co-chair of the Equality and Diversity Committee for the Writers Guild of Great Britain, one of the unions in the UK, the Writers Union, and I'm beginning to learn from hearing other people's stories. It's a role I've taken on fairly recently, but I've been on the committee for a while, and.
Tom, you're so good at this because this is going to be my next question. You
Well,
carry on.
it naturally follows that it's hard to sometimes it's hard to hear people's stories, but what I have heard a lot is that intersectionality of all kinds is actually the work that we need to start doing
Yeah.
to really get equality, because often people are seen in one way and one way only. And I thought that this was just my experience as a human being, but I've learnt that actually it's the kind of the new frontier is to have yourself recognized, because we've all got intersections at some
Yeah.
level, whether that's gender, sexuality, disability, color, race, everything. There are so many intersections, and so to have those recognized is the new challenge, actually. So I'm really glad to be able to talk about that, because I think it's really important to
Mm.
to remember that you're not just one thing, and that might be your Welshness or where you're from or whatever.
Mm.
It's very hard to be recognized in more than one. Well, it's that dreadful word, isn't it? Category. We're all meant to be put into
Yeah.
camps or categories or whatever. I don't want to be put into any
No.
category, Kieran. I just want to be a person.
It's these things about labels and words, and it all comes back to language and how we use language to define ourselves, doesn't it? And all words are made up. All words are made up, and language is evolving, and yeah, how we associate meaning to words, that's
And
really
often
interesting, I think.
language doesn't evolve quick enough around feelings and conversations, and we're in a real time. It's interesting, isn't it? We're in a real time of dichotomy, because social media and the press are doing all this shouting, and it's all very binary and
Yeah.
non-nuanced. And then actually the conversations I'm having with people that are in my life are all incredibly nuanced and
Mm.
and interesting. And um I met someone yesterday who is, on the face of it, totally different to me, different politically, different in terms of social, economic
Mm.
background, all of those things. And three-quarters of an hour through the conversation, we were coming home together because we live very close.
Mm.
They felt comfortable enough to tell me about their ADHD and autism diagnosis. And so suddenly we had a really um shared point, and we had a very nuanced conversation, and that was precious, because
Yeah.
I knew they were telling me because they trusted me and because they knew that I would understand. But I don't think they've told many people that, so that was really special.
Wow. And what does your role with the Writers Guild involve? What are you doing? What are your aims in your role as the co-chair of the Equality and Diversity Committee?
The committee was set up a few years ago to do exactly what it says on the tin, to make our industry more equitable and diverse, and to do that, reaching down, that I talked about earlier, to include everyone. And it was brilliantly run before, and I've just taken over as one of the co-chairs with Miranda Walker, who's a TV writer and children's writer, and is fantastic. And our aims are to listen, to we want to make the committee into, it's part of a union, so we want to make it into a campaigning committee a little bit more. It's done quite a lot of campaigning before. We've done things around access riders, and we've done
Mm,
things around equality rights around women, and that work is still continuing. But we'd like to do some more campaigning. We'd like to work across all the committees of the guild and have a representative from every committee, because we feel that it's not just a one committee issue, that equality and diversity, funnily enough, affects everyone and every
yeah,
writer. And every issue. So actually, our aim is to get our tentacles everywhere that we possibly can. And yeah, but our main aims, I suppose, are to keep fighting, and
mm,
I'm fully aware that as a white cis male, I don't know everything and don't have every experience. So actually, the current aim is to make, it sounds so funny, but to make the committee as diverse as it possibly can be, with as
mm,
multitude of voices, and then to work out what work needs to be done. And I have to say, Ciaran, that it's been very sobering for me to realize, and I suppose I knew it already a little bit, but when you're in that role, you start to realize how much work still needs to be done
yeah,
in so many places. And it's wonderful that we sit here being positive, and we absolutely should.
yes,
But for so many people, it's really tough out there at the moment. And I don't just mean in terms of work, which is tough, but also the discrimination that's going
yeah,
on, the casual. I'm just going to talk about ableism because it's why we're here. But we could put that with racism, xenophobia,
yeah,
whatever. But the casual nature of it, that it's absolutely fine to say to someone in a meeting, we're not going to give you that job because you're disabled or whatever. They're
yeah.
very happy to say it, and that needs to change. So yeah, so the aims of the committee are in a way clear. And if you're a writer and you're working professionally, or if you're a student writer, then come and join the Writers Guild, because it's really important that we get as many diverse voices as you can. And if you feel that you're not represented, or you're not part of the gang, then feel free to reach out to me, and we'll have a chat, because if that's something we're not getting to,
Mm.
then we need you and we need your voice, you know.
I feel like I should be more involved and I should be more active within the guild. So
I
maybe
might
we
have to
could.
take that as a promise from you, Ciaran,
Well,
there.
I think we should maybe have a conversation after we record this about how I
Uh,
can
I
help
mean, I mean,
in
I
any way.
caveat again. I caveat all this with trade unions aren't for everyone. There is a cost
Mm,
involved. That's another thing. We're trying to make it non-prohibitive, but I really feel that we are. It is better when we have a more diverse membership who can bring that experience, and we want to hear from people. And I would hate it to think that we weren't including as many different kinds of writers as we can. And it's not just, also, we should say, it's not just script writers or writers for theatre. All sorts of mediums are covered, and very,
yes.
very welcome. So, and it's, again, all I'm ever doing, I think, is trying to find that sense of community. I think that, to go back to what special school gave me, was a sense of how important community is, actually.
Yes.
And so yeah, so I'm still seeking that community kind of in everything that I do. It's why I like being in rehearsals and with actors and so on, you know. So yeah, so it's no, I really enjoy and feel proud of my work with the guild. And I should say that it's all voluntary. So everyone who runs
Mm.
it, there's a core staff who are paid, but all the activists are volunteers who are professional writers.
And in terms of the industry, in terms of increasing representation and diversity within the industry, huge question, Tom, as we come to the end of this podcast. But what needs to be done, do you think? What are the practical steps that you think could be taken to increase that and make a difference?
I am a big fan of quotas. It's not a catch-all term, but I am a big fan of broadcasters and theatres setting quotas until they realise the value that we bring or diverse writers bring. I think they should sort of be made to do it financially, but also I think trusting artists always. That's what it comes down to is trust artists and trust their knowledge and their lived experience and that they've got something to say. And so yeah, I think it's very simple actually, in terms of what needs to be done, which is find the best people who can write the best things or perform the best things and let them tell their stories or
Yeah.
tell the stories that they
They
want to
want
tell.
to,
That will do it. If you find the very best people and you look outward and you really challenge yourself and say, if you're the artistic director of a theatre, does this represent does the writers and the actors and so on that in this company represent what I see when I leave my front door in the morning in the United Kingdom? Does this look like
yeah,
the population? You'll pretty much get there. You know what I mean? And then trust them. Don't try and um, tell them what they should make and put
no,
your view on it. Let them make the work and tell the stories that they want to make. Enable. And we
yes,
found that I was on the selection panel for the National Play Commissioning Scheme that we did, and we put out nothing really about um, diversity. We didn't set any quotas or anything, and we read a lot of stuff blind, and as you do when
mm,
you're selecting plays. And funnily enough, um, even by doing it blind, we ended up with probably one of the most diverse lists of
wow,
plays that's ever been commissioned, just by going on the stories and the quality of the writing. Now, that tells us something, I think. I
yeah,
took that as a great sort of positive point because I felt like that would yeah, that's it really.
yeah,
I don't have it. There aren't any easy answers. The other
yeah,
thing is to listen. Is to listen to people's point of view, try and be nuanced, try and care, and yeah, and I would say just be kind and try and meet
yeah,
people. I made this will make you laugh, Ciaran, but I realized a couple of years ago that I didn't have any straight male friends. And
yeah,
and I realized that I was out of the conversation around what straight cis men were talking about. I didn't know about what was going on in those spaces because I'm always in sort of all female spaces and then me or all gay male spaces. And I
yeah.
thought this is a real gap in my knowledge and my understanding. So I went out and I made some really lovely straight male friends.
Oh,
And
brilliant.
and that was a sort of conscious effort to make myself a little bit have a bit more diversity in my life because I didn't have those people there, and I'm very glad to have them. Now,
Yes,
slightly a bit of a comic take on it, but it was I did
mm,
suddenly think I don't have all sectors of what I see when I leave
society,
my
yeah,
front door. So yeah, just
yeah,
be kind, listen, have conversations, and we will get there. But also,
yes,
I would say to any commissioner or artistic director, really challenge yourself to make work that you doesn't necessarily speak to you immediately in your experience,
yeah,
and audiences don't always know because we're in such a time of money is tight, because we're in such a time of taking less risk. Audiences don't necessarily know what they want until they're given it or what they need.
yeah.
So just take a bit of extra risk this year, and you'll do okay.
Thank you very much, Tom. And what Tom was really saying there was commission his say one of my books.
Yeah, quite right. Commission Ciaran, straight
Thank you,
away.
Tom.
Commission Ciaran.
You're
No,
such important words there. Thank you so much. My last question. for you to finish is what is one thing that you wish people knew about cerebral palsy?
That not everybody is in a wheelchair. I think that would be
Mm,
that it or that or I'll broaden that out that's that it comes in so many different forms and yeah that we don't all look the same. I suppose
yeah,
that is my point, that we don't all look or sound the same, and yeah, and that it can be a really brilliant thing. I suppose that's two
yeah.
points, but yeah, that we don't all look the same, and or are the same. Or and also that we don't all know one another. I don't know
Well, I
every
think I
disabled
might be
person in the
just proving
world.
that point this month, that you
Well,
are.
you know us all, but we don't know each other.
Tom, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your
It's been a
time
treat.
today.
It's been a treat. Thank you, Ciaran. Thank you so much.
And thank you for listening or watching this episode of the Palsy Podcast. We're coming to the end of the month now, but I have two more episodes going up on the 30th and the 31st of March. So please like and subscribe and share to anyone who you think might be interested in this kind of content. Thank you again to Tom Wentworth for joining me today, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Palsy Podcast. But for now, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from Tom. Goodbye.
Bye bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Palsy Podcast with me, Ciaran Fitzgerald. I want to thank my guests for joining me, and I hope that you'll stay tuned for the next episode and more throughout March. Thank you.